Could I invite the kids up, especially the saints? Come on up. I know a good song about saints. For all the saints who from their labors rest, who thee by faith before the world confessed. Thy name, O Jesus, be forever blessed. Alleluia, alleluia. You guys know that, don't you? I hope. Very good. Hey, it is so great to have you here, all of you, and especially really appreciate those of you that took the time to dress up as a saint. Do you know, saints are wonderful people, right? You know, they live just like us, but they call it heroically virtuous lives. That is, they love the Lord so much that they always did as best they could, they did what Jesus wanted them to do. So my favorite saint is sitting right over there, St. Francis. You want to stand up for just a moment? Yeah. So there is St. Francis. And let me just tell you real quickly, because St. Francis is a good example to me. His dad, I don't know about your dad, but St. Francis' dad was really pretty well off. He had a lot of money, and so that meant that St. Francis, when he was growing up, he had everything he wanted. Be like you guys, having all the toys you wanted and all that kind of stuff. But St. Francis, he had all this stuff. He was a popular guy. Everybody liked him. And you know, he got to this point in his life where he decided that all those things weren't really all that important. You know, all this stuff that his dad had given him was like, you know, this isn't really making me happy. And so that's when he started following the Lord in a really close way. In fact, what the adults would appreciate is a very radical way. And so that's what he did. He followed the Lord. And you know what happened after that? You know, lots of other people came to him and said, hey, we want to do what you're doing. People followed him, and it started religious order. And we still have Franciscans with us. We have a group that meets in our church. They're called Second Order Franciscans. And all because Francis decided, you know, this life that my dad thinks is great and society thinks is great, not so good. So thank you, Francis. I appreciate you being here. Thanks. And that's what all the saints be. So I don't know, I hope you know something about the saint you dressed up as, and those of you that didn't dress up, hope you know a story about a saint. But the idea is we just want to be like them because they give us really great examples, okay? You could do that. You could be like a saint, right? All right, thanks so much for being here again. Would you give me a hand? I appreciate the... And also, thanks to the parents. You know, I appreciate that some Sundays, I'm sure, maybe lots of Sundays, it's hard to get the kids out of bed and get them here, and now you got to get them dressed up. So I appreciate you doing that. The idea of, you know, the story I told you about St. Francis imitating Jesus, you know, that's what the second reading is about, imitation. Sometimes you and I, we hear the word imitation, we don't think it's a positive term because we think of knockoffs. You know, oh yeah, that thing they're trying to sell me, it's just an imitation of the real thing. I don't want that, I want the real thing. But if you stop and consider it, there is a very positive aspect to imitating. You know, I mean, you and I are never going to own probably very lovely, beautiful paintings, but we can own imitations. We can own prints of those paintings and hang them on the wall, you know, some scene that's very meaningful to us. We can have that there and we can enjoy it, you know, because the person who made the copy, you know, they appreciated the beauty of the original and wanted to imitate it. And certainly the same thing about the saints. We want to try to imitate the saints. These people, in varying ways, you know, they followed the Lord, and we would want to do exactly the same way. And I really hope that, you know, all of you, I don't know how much you know about the saints. Many of us, you know, they said, oh, you're going to get confirmed, you need a saint. And, you know, well, for the older ones, we didn't have Google. Someone gave us a book, and we just flipped until we found a picture we liked, and then, like, okay, that's my saint. But I hope you would find a saint that would matter to you, that actually would inspire you in some way. As I got older, it was St. Francis that really touched me. There's another, a blessed Edmund Rice, lived in the 1800s, gave up an incredible fortune. He was the richest guy of his day, the kind of the Elon Musk and Bill Gates of his day, if you will. He gave it all up to start a school for poor kids. It was an amazing story that inspires me, especially when I'm sitting down trying to figure out how much, what the Lord wants me to do with my things. What's my responsibility to it? I just thought it would be helpful, though, to tie all that into the second reading. You probably don't know the background of this. This is Paul's letter. It's called First Thessalonians. And it's the first letter that he wrote to this little group of Christians at a place called Thessalonica. Paul, in one of his missionary journeys, he did 3 of them. He'd walk or shipped all around the Mideast and then over towards Greece. And on one of those journeys, he ended up in this city, Thessalonica, and he spent just 3 weeks with them. And he taught them about Jesus and taught them the faith. And then later, he wondered if they had stuck with it, if they had fallen away, or if they were still growing in their faith. And he found out to his joy that they were indeed doing amazing things. And if you caught in the reading, or you can take a look at it, he says, "You imitated us. And by doing that, you imitated the Lord." Because Paul and his companions were there amongst them. They lived, of course, a Christian life as they taught them about the faith. And these people started doing what Paul was doing, and things started going really well for them. It wasn't that they weren't being persecuted for their faith, but they realized the life Paul had invited them into was so much better than the one they had before. And so they imitated Paul, therefore they imitated Jesus. And that's, of course, what you and I are called to do. Imitate the Lord. And if the saints can help us do that, that's terrific. But otherwise, we just want to do what, that old bracelet years and years ago said. What would Jesus do? And so we're watching the news, and we want to, in our head, okay, how does Jesus watch the news? How does Jesus react to this? How does Jesus handle this work colleague that is really a bit of a pain? How do I do that? And if I can just imitate Christ, that's what we're called to do. And then you stop and think, well, what are the results of that? In other words, our motivation is we want to imitate the Lord because we're disciples of the Lord. But what comes out of that? Well, in Paul's day, he would travel, and when he would get to places he had been before, it makes sense, people would ask him, "Hey, Paul, tell us about how things are going. Where have you been? What's going on?" And Paul would tell them stories. But he mentions in this reading we heard that he never had to bring up the church at Thessalonica. He never brought it up because when he would be in these conversations with people, they would bring it up. He writes to them, he says, "You have been a model to all the surrounding area. You guys have been following Christ. You've been imitators of Christ, and your community is imitating Christ. And because of that, all sorts of people know about your community. They know about you because of what you've been done. They know about you so much that I don't have to talk about it. If I bring it up, they go like, oh, you don't have to tell us about this. We've heard of these people. They're amazing." And so I just want to put that vision, if you will, in our minds. What's it look like if we, at St. Anne's, we individually, we're going to do it imperfectly, but we said, okay, we're going to keep getting better at this. We're going to keep imitating Christ. We're going to do our absolute best not to listen and follow people that aren't imitating Christ. We're going to follow saints. We're going to follow, people like this and the saints, people we know who are living out their faith. We're going to imitate Christ. And if we did that, what would happen? Is it not entirely possible that just like the church of Thessalonica, you and this church would be known to the community? All those people, we've heard about them. We hear all the good that they do. We hear about how they handle issues and things like that. And not only the community, but perhaps the diocese, and not only the diocese, perhaps the state. Who knows where the Lord would lead it? And we're not following the Lord become popular. We're not following the Lord because we want more and more people. We want to get stats. We want to have big numbers. We want to be famous. That's not why we're doing it. We're following the Lord because the Lord asked us to follow him, and we know that's good for us. But as we follow the Lord, indeed, people will notice. People that you deal with on an everyday basis, they'll look at you and say, something's different here. They're not like these other people. They're not bitterly complaining about the news like all my other friends. I wonder what's going on. People will look at this church and they'll say, hey, that parish, they're a little different than everybody else. Wonder why that is. And by doing that in our own way and as a community, we'll spread the gospel, because that's what Paul was doing. And that's what the church of Thessalonica did, simply by following the Lord. We can do that too. As I said before, we're not going to do it perfectly. We'll have our ups and downs, but we just need to keep at it. I hope you'll join me in that, because as we get better at it, then people will look at us and say, that congregation, that's full of a bunch of saints.